Good afternoon. Why don't you guys come forward? We're going to do this interactive. So folks in the room, come forward. Yeah, we're trying to do truly democratizing. And does this work? Do we know? That's fine. We're going to improvise. Okay. Good afternoon. It's nice to see everybody here. Thank you for moving forward. Thank you for being here for the session. I know it's been a long day and this is a hot room. So we will try and make this interactive. Hey, folks at home, we see your names. We see that you're there. And if you want to participate, you can raise your hands or unmute yourselves. Harsha, I'm talking at you. I don't know if the others are there, but I know that you are. So and we might even cold call you, Harsha, to see how well you're following what's going on here. Does that sound good? Sounds great, right? Okay, so we can have Harsha here. I might minimize it throughout, but we can see the little.
One second. This got. There we go.
Okay, good. I think we're making progress. We're making progress. We're going to make the most of it. So. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to talk about democratizing forecasting learning. If you were here this morning, and I think I recognize most of the faces from earlier today, Rob was talking a lot about open source free components of our ecosystem, if you will. Rob was talking about databases that are free. He was talking about packages. He was talking about learning materials, and he was talking about research. And I feel that there was one more category that he mentioned. I'm going to focus on the learning process. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we teach, how I teach, and a little bit of the principles of what I have found works really, really well, especially as it pertains to forecasting, analytics, data science, areas where we as a community care about. And hopefully you'll see how it relates to other efforts around forecasting for social good, and I'll try and do my job of connecting those dots. Okay, so as several authors in this room wrote about in their paper just recently, right, published. What are we talking about when we're talking about forecasting for social good? We're talking about real problems. So when we talk about forecasting in this context for social good, something that is actually specific and context in the sense that you can find it in the real world. It is out there and it is a problem that real decision makers face and deal with on a regular basis. We're talking about advancing, I'm just going to minimize the video a little bit. Focused on advancing social and environmental goals and prioritizing these over more conventional measures like economic measures, profitability, and the like. For me, this translates often into stuff that I do around multi-objective, where there could be multiple objectives that you're trying to satisfy at once, and financial or economic objectives may not even be one of those, but we're trying to forecast not just for improving profitability and accuracy for the sake of accuracy, but we're trying to really improve the way that and think differently about the way that we forecast to benefit society at large in many different ways. Okay, and then finally, it has a broader impact. So it's beyond just our narrow academic community. It's beyond our narrow IIF community. It has a broader implication to the world around us today. And at least if I hope that I summarize the attributes of what you all have talked about in terms of forecasting for the social good. Okay, so that's starting us. This is just me kind of highlighting some of the attributes that have already been established, which I think is a useful framework for what I'm about to discuss in more detail. So why democratize the learning process itself? Why could this be valuable? I'm going to pause and see if anybody in this room, has a sense for why does it matter that we democratize the process of learning in and of itself. And I'm really good at cold calling people and putting them on my feet. Yeah.
People will be more engaged and pay more attention as a result.
Okay, people will get more engaged because why? When you're a democracy.
They have skin in the game that they put their vote in.
Okay, beautiful. So in a way, we'll get buy-in and it will get more people involved. Okay, good. So if we democratize learning, maybe we stand a chance to get people more invested in these forecasts and then in kind of getting better at forecasting. Good. Another reason, Mike? Another reason? Yeah, go ahead.
People and stakeholders are more likely to trust the forecasts that we produce if they understand them.
Beautiful. We live in a world with a lot of fake news, a lot of distrust. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tomorrow if you come to my talk tomorrow morning. But there's a high degree of distrust in society. And so if we make the learning more accessible to more people and make it and enable them to feel like they're part of the process, then maybe they'll learn to trust the forecast more and understand a little bit more where it comes from. So in a way, you know, forecasting is all around us. It is increasing. It is being used by more and more people. And really, we're trying to encourage more people to join in and be part of the process. And therefore, we need people to be get used to understand what it is to talk about the future, a world filled with ambiguity and uncertainty using the language of forecasting. Okay? In addition to that, more people have access. Because of all these amazing efforts that this group and others have been engaged with, there are more people downloading the programs, trying to run the packages, trying to create these forecasts. It's at the fingertips, it's costless. So therefore, more people are engaged in it, and we need to give them the right tools and the right capabilities to benefit from it. Forecasting brings in different domains. You see folks from philosophy, from literature, from social sciences, from, of course, from the whole medical sphere. There are people in every different domain right now. Art, I mean, how many years ago would you imagine, I mean, not that long ago, would you imagine that people in the arts are now working with forecasting models in order to create the next algorithm to generate a new Picasso or a new Rembrandt? This is happening around us today. So it's happening, forecasting is happening even in unusual and unexpected places. And then finally, the process has become a lot more complex. Data sets are larger, data sets are everywhere, data sets are, data needs to be collected, it needs to be distributed, it needs to be shared, and more folks are joining along the way. It used to be a much more focused kind of component of the analytics done in a very segmented part, but now you find it, there's multiple steps to it, and more people along the way in your organizations of various sorts are getting involved. In addition to all of this, and I'm going to quote our organizer today again, in addition to all of this, there is a call for action, okay? Really, the learning has been neglected in some way, okay? We've democratized a lot of different things. The software is free, a lot of the tools are free, but we really haven't thought about the learning process as closely as we can, because the learning itself is hard, and the learning itself limits who can access because they're either intimidated or they don't really believe that they can do it. And we need to shift our thinking. We need to think about decision makers. We need to think about how people who actually make these things happen in practice, how can they absorb this information? Not just, again, not just academics among academics thinking about the % improvement in accuracy, but how can we open our door and make more people join in that have real decisions to be made in practice using forecasts around them, okay? So the call for action, which I really applaud and I believe in, is about how do we rethink the process of onboarding. And I know that there's a lot of ongoing efforts now, workshops globally to get this in the hands of the people. I think it's a good opportunity to revisit and think, how are we going to do that, okay? Are we just going to use the same tool, the same slides? Slides may be great, but maybe there's a different learning process itself. Okay, so how do we democratize learning? How can we do it? Any ideas? And those who know me and what I do, what we do at Darden might already have an idea of what I'm going to propose, because it's not that surprising. But like, how do you do this? How do you make learning more inviting to everybody? Again, I'm pausing strategically. Harsha, this might be your cue. Any ideas on how you make it more accessible and how do you democratize the way that people learn?
Make available all the resources freely for who are like,
okay, so we can make the resources, beautiful, Harsha. So we can make the resources free, right? So we can definitely make resources free. And I think that this community today definitely is going to walk away with this notion that if they produce something, they're going to open it up to people, or they're going to seek and encourage and find ways in order to do that. Definitely. Are there other ways in which we can do that? Michael.
I think when the context is relevant to you personally, whatever problem is, the relevance to individual learners or students in this case, important to get that engagement, desire to put in the effort to learn the methods. data or other aspects of the problem.
Yeah, if you come in and you're talking to a bunch of individuals who work for a nonprofit, or if you're talking to folks that are working in the agriculture business and you're giving them examples from, let's say, business forecasting, it's not going to really appeal to them as much. And vice versa. If you're talking about somebody that works in a retail context and you're bringing them examples from crop yield, they may not totally understand or it might not resonate with them. Okay, so bring it, make it closer to home. Good. Other ways, maybe?
There's got to be some motivation, like a incentive, for the system. Right? For like a more transparent system and truthful data.
Yeah, so maybe explain to folks that are the learners in the circumstance how it's relevant to them, how their efforts will actually make a difference in their lives as well. Okay. So what I'm going to pitch builds on these comments, and we could clearly spend a lot more time on this, but we do have a reception and it is hot in here. So I'm going to pitch a specific approach that we've been teaching with for years. This is going to be a little bit of an adjustment for it, which kind of allows you to do some of what you guys, the three comments that were mentioned here. And I'm going to use the case method, and I'm going to tell you what I mean by that, because a lot of people use that term, the Socratic method. I'm going to tell you a little bit why I believe that there's a lot of hope here if we flip the way that we think about the classroom. Okay, it is not instructor-led, it is not speaker-led, it is learner-led. Okay, and my emphasis is going to be on the learners, and I'm going to tell you how we accomplish that in this context. Okay, so what is the case method? So here are just a few screenshots from cases that I wrote. We at the school that I work at, Darden, we write cases as part of our promotion. Like we write papers, so we have to write papers, but we also have to write cases. And case studies are based on real decision maker situations where we describe a scenario. We don't provide any theory. There is no real kind of textbook type material. This is all storytelling based on a company and a decision maker. At the heart of every single case has to be a decision that has to be made, and in the context of forecasting with data, and with some kind of forecast that has to be generated with data. Okay, and all of these cases are examples of that, and there are many more if you're interested. And what we do is we provide these cases, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a moment. We provide these cases to the student, to the learners, and they have to read the cases, prepare the cases, and it's their job to come and propose a course of action.
They get data with the cases.
In the context of forecasting, yes, they get data. They get data, they don't necessarily, and you'll see in a moment what tools we can do to equip them with the ability to do something if they have never done this before. Okay, but yes, in most circumstances, they'll get some kind of data set. Okay, real data set. Maybe sometimes it's disguised. Some of these companies want you to disguise it a little bit, but it's genuine data that organizations have been working with. Okay. And the idea behind the case method, or the Socratic method, if you kind of take it kind of to the extreme, is that you're really having a learner-centered experience. I'm going to walk in and I'm going to say, Ryan, what do you recommend? And what are the benefits of this? What are the benefits? And again, we could kind of spend some time getting it out of you because I want this to be case method proper, but the benefits are the following. First, everything is done in context, meaning you never talk about an abstract X and Y, you never talk about an abstract regression. Everything has to be done, and I'm just giving an example or whatever model it could be, it could be a logistic regression, it could be some kind of tree-based model, whatever model you're developing, it's always in the service of the problem, okay? And in that sense, there really isn't one model that might be correct or not correct, okay? There could be some ill-advised analysis, or there could be some problematic analysis, but there could be probably a dozen or so approaches that actually could be legit. Because when you have data, as you say, in the real world, there's no real one solution that is the ultimate truth underlying the problem, but decision makers have to make sense of the data that they have and come up with models that are sensible, like everybody in this room practices on a regular basis. So you're really putting the learner in that position to say, here's some data, here's the decision problem, make sense of it, okay? One of the biggest reasons to use this approach, and what really I think makes it powerful and empowers the learners, is the fact that people learn better from stories. People will forever remember a solution for a problem that they sympathize with the decision maker. Okay, they will understand. They will remember what they did in famous cases that we've studied. They will remember what they did when they struggled through some very complex data set and they ran a competition. They will remember from real life context, and they will be easier for them to use later in reality when they're faced with a similar problem. It is really empowering them to influence people in the room. When I walk in and Ryan's going to pitch a solution, what Ryan is trying to do is get all of you to agree with his approach or to not tear it down with questions. And Ryan is going to practice defending his position or actually on the spot, listening to the critique and saying, actually, you're right. That was probably the wrong assessment. Maybe I need to add a few variables. Maybe I need to remove. Maybe I've made a mistake where I, found myself running a model with too many correlated variables and the like, but he'll listen to that from the reactions of people around him, okay? Not me telling him, oh, be careful of multicollinearity. That's not gonna help. He will have to fall into it and learn how to react to it in the moment, okay? And so we're practicing vocalizing, we're practicing the learners talking, not the instructor. People are getting over that first time when they stand in front of the group and they have to talk about forecasting models and their recommendation for a decision problem that they have to make a recommendation on. So that's why the approach, the Socratic approach, is so useful. We tend to talk about 4 Ps. It's helpful to remember. Throw out some Ps. What do you think these Ps have to do with the classroom that is led by a learner-centered environment? What are some Ps? Words that begin with P in the English language?
Practice.
Practice.
Presentation.
Yes.
Programming.
Can you see the enthusiasm? I mean, come on. I love it. There are so many P's. We talked about 4. There are probably at least 7 or 8 that you can list here, which really helps you. Preparation is one. People arrive to the discussion ready because you put it on them. They know that they're going to walk in and they're going to be expected to say something. So it is on them to walk in and own the space and to make the most of the time. And if they're not prepared, then the day kind of goes by. But that means that people are bought in. You have that motivation. You have that incentive that we talked about earlier. Okay. We have preparation. We have participation, like we just saw. It livens things up and it makes it much more relevant. We have the presence. You're in the room. You're listening. You're inviting a conversation. People think that if they listen, they learn. Oftentimes until you've done it yourself, you're not going to really totally learn. And we're professional with where we acted, but we practice and we practice and we practice. And I love the programming. It's a good.
Unfortunately, none of my P's.
I know. I'm going to add them now. Okay. What was the other one?
Presentation.
And presentation is in here because I see presentation as part of the participation, okay? So you're actively contributing, you're actually actively speaking, and that's exactly the point, okay? Okay, beautiful. And then in another way is that when you do this, I'm not sure, maybe we can talk more about the groups that you're bringing together in these workshops. But one thing that when I work with companies, especially true, also students in programs, but this is especially true when I go and deliver these types of sessions to companies and organizations, you start to learn who's in the room. You start to get to know each other because you're talking. And so you know where the skill sets lie. You know who to go and find later when you need that capability. Otherwise, you're sitting very passively listening to other people. You're never going to find that skill set around you. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a quick example, and I'm going to be quick because I know that my time is limited here. So this is just a course. This is just an analytics course or a data science course. This is, we call it applied business analytics, but this is just an example from a course because I want to bring this to life a little bit more and give you just a few tips and concrete examples, and then I'll wrap up. So this is kind of, I'm not going to drag this on. The course has objectives that I'm sure that you guys, many of you use in your own courses and probably part of the workshops that you run. Get an understanding of really how data, how forecasting really affects decision making for novices and for experts. So it's really trying to bring these communities together, not exclude either community, give practical and hands-on experience with some of the coding and the programming. So to make it a little bit less intimidating and to appreciate the work, the translator role. Translator is a term that McKinsey really started using 2 or 3 years ago. And I think it's a great one. Translators are those individuals in the organization who really have to move forward and operationalize different decisions that rely on forecast, right? So they're bridging the business functions or the organizational function. It doesn't have to be a for-profit setup, but they're really bridging the technical skills with the organizational skills, and those are the translators that we're really trying to build here. Okay. The course, you know, in some ways we think about the coding experience as a dojo. So the learners are going to share their screen. They're going to present their work. They're going to run through an analysis. It's not going to be the instructor that does it. I will never, this is a highly unusual for me that I have to use my Surface. I never share my own screen. You will never see me run through code or run through an Excel or anything. It is always going to be a student or a learner who does that, even in kind of executive kind of settings. We've been working with Google Colab recently because it's easy. Tableau has free learning licenses, ARP, and the like. I do want to spend a moment to talk about starter code. So at least at the beginning, one way to make it more accessible is to provide some kind of scaffolding, some kind of starter code for individuals. And the notion is that as a day goes by, as a course goes by, as you develop a relationship, you strip away some of it. The moment you've seen something, let's say you've done a few plots, next time you provide starter code, it just says add your plot here, and look at, like, you're encouraging. It's like training wheels. You're kind of taking that off, so they see an example and then they do it themselves. And the guidelines and the assignment and the instructions are take this analysis the next step. Okay, so do it, take it further, develop it further. So you're really encouraging creativity by providing a starter code to make it less intimidating. And then there's other things that you can supplement it with, and I'll show that quickly. You can do labs, you can do discussion boards, which I'll show you in a moment. And we tend to use this also, of course, Kaggle and all the usual tools that are around us. We tend to use it in a very proactive way. Okay, and I want to make sure, was there any question? Use their own language to share. Okay, beautiful. I love the participation. Rebecca, thank you very much. I just noticed your comment. Okay. So we're really empowering the learners. I think we mentioned most of these. We're empowering the learners to own their process. We're trying to encourage them to be active. And by the way, this does not mean that it has to be in person. There are very successful ways in which this can come to life via synchronous and asynchronous sessions. You just have to be thoughtful about what material you deliver synchronously and what material you deliver asynchronously. And I'm hoping that how I'm delivering this session is an example for really what you could do. You could cold call and include a lot more components from the people who are joining in at the same time. Sometimes people like to call this the flipped classroom, where people really come prepared for class. They do the work up front. Any material that is more theoretical could be provided by videos, so people can consume them in their own time and rewatch them multiple times. Part of what makes people uncomfortable with the material is that in a lecture format, it goes by really fast. Or when you're presenting it live, it goes by really fast. If these are technical tools that you're trying to equip more people with, the videos can allow them to rewatch it, and you use the time together to be more discussion oriented than not. Okay. Okay, let's keep on going. Okay, the process that I encourage is a 4-step process. Individual prep, so learners should be doing some work on their own, and we provide like some guidelines. Mensch.io is just an example of an online discussion board that I've used, but there's tons of others. You don't have to use Mensch.io, of course, which is Mensch.io is a sophisticated discussion board which allows you to comment, agree, disagree, and clarify, and have really rich debates online. And then you can analyze whether students are agreeable or whether they disagree, whether they're collaborative, whether they are very negative to people's reaction. You can kind of get a sense and give them some feedback on their kind of profile of participation, but it's a way to engage them in the conversation before they even came into the classroom. All my classes, once you get to step 3, every time we have a case discussion, when possible, encourage small group interaction. So you 4 go ahead and talk about the discussion, the case, the problem before we meet. You 4 meet, even now, 10 minutes, I'll send people off in small groups to discuss their approach to the solution before we come together. And there's a reason for it. Why do you think it would be useful to have those small group discussions before you come into a bigger group discussion?
Some people are less comfortable sharing with bigger group.
Exactly right. Some people are really less comfortable sharing in a bigger group. So if they come with 4 or 5 people, they can share ideas. Maybe they build their confidence and then they walk in and they share more broadly. Good other things that could happen in a small group.
More ideas can be spread because there's more.
Love it. More ideas can be spread, right? So you get an opportunity to kind of share with each other, and then you come in equipped with that new information to the bigger group discussion. And every time you meet, your learning and understanding goes deeper and deeper and deeper. The case discussion is not just a repetition of what people did on their own, and it's not a repetition of what people did in their small groups. If there's no extra value, then there's no point. So there's always an idea that it builds gradually, okay? Then you come together and you do the larger group discussion, which is kind of what we're practicing a little bit here, really leaving the fact that it's a bit ambiguous. There's never going to be a right answer, wrong answer, or some things are technically incorrect, but there's not going to be a single right answer. Your approach could be right, your approach could be right, and we'll be open to multiple perspectives. That's why I never provide my solution. But when somebody shares their screen, we will post whatever was shared communally. So if you are sharing your screen and running through code, we will get your code shared between everybody afterwards. Never my prepared solution, because it's very misleading that there is a solution, okay? But we will actually share and crowdsource from the class whatever we saw and we vetted together, okay? And then finally, you need to provide and encourage group reflection in order to create that continuity from class to class. And so using things like Slack that I saw that I think you're already embracing in your workshops, using again Ment.io, those opportunities to kind of allow for reflection. I'm going to wrap up by kind of, again, being very tactical here and giving specific examples, and I'm happy to share my entire directory with all of these, but like, there's specific instructions. So the instructions are pretty kind of specific. So folks know what to do to prepare. The code itself, once they look through the code is going to have blank places and gaps for them to fulfill. And as the course progresses, there is more and more of that gaps in the code. Competitions, not overwhelming students, but at least 1 or 2 competitions. Sometimes it's just a visualization competition. Sometimes it's a Kaggle competition. Sometimes it's just another type of competition. That always gets the juices flowing. It always is good. And it's always helpful, to experience. And then what I want to end is with, or I think I have a couple of other notes, but this is really what I wanted to kind of drive home. And this is my main point here, is that what this does is that it really develops empathy. Like when somebody is very experienced and they're in a room with folks that are mixed background, they actually find it really hard to walk novices through complex forecasting ideas. So they're practicing how to do that. On the other hand, novices are getting an opportunity, a safe space to experiment with their voices. And both sides are coming together to appreciate what they get from interacting with each other, okay? It is not, the idea is that actually it's a combined kind of crowd that works together to get this improved empathy and respect. And therefore you're more willing to walk up to somebody in your organization later to find out how to do it as well. It really makes those folks with experience understand how to talk to individuals who are seeing in material for the first time. And it's surprisingly challenging and empowering for them. Again, it creates a more diverse cross-disciplinary team, expands really how open it is for folks to participate. And fundamentally, it's all about accountability and decision-making. You walk into the classroom and I say, what do you recommend? You cannot say, it depends. Or you cannot say, I need more data. Because if you say I need more data, I'm going to ask you, what data do you need and what are you going to do with it? And what do you need to see in the data in order to make your mind? And if you don't take action, we're going to ask you so what is your next step? And so it really is kind of trying to improve accountability and decision-making by having to commit and explain and motivate why you're making a certain recommendation. I talked about the Slack. I talked about all the coding ideas. And maybe I'll just expand on the Dojo a little bit. This notion that we're all watching and helping each other. So if somebody is in the driver's seat or somebody's in the Dojo and walking through their code, the others that are observing can share their knowledge and have to instruct somebody who's in the driver's seat how to do it. It's not like about, oh, move away, I'm going to take over and show you how to do it. It's about how do I guide you to get you to where you need to be. And so it's, again, like imagine that you're in a kind of, you know, my kids go to Taekwondo. I don't know who else has been to the dojo, where it's really about observing and helping people learn through it and not actually trying to get them out of there as soon as possible. We have students engage with real projects that are relevant to them and their contexts. You know, I have some courses online that kind of expand on it. But really, I just wanted to kind of pause and maybe conclude. I think we're out of time. So I think this is, are we okay in terms of time? We're about done. This is okay. This is it. I know that I went a few minutes over, but we started a few minutes late, so hopefully it's okay. So really, my encouragement is to use real cases with real decision makers. My encouragement is for you to let go of your voice and let other people in the class learn through expressing their voice, because that's how people actually learn best. My encouragement to you is to make it interactive and dynamic and steer the conversation to allow people to join in and help each other learn, and empower them to know that they actually have a lot of capabilities already within them, and they just have to practice it and learn how to get confident with it. Because at the end of the day, that will mean that more people will find it accessible, and they won't be as intimidated thinking that they need an expert in the front of the room leading the way. And I'll pause there, and if there's any questions, comments, thoughts, I'm happy to have those, and I'm happy to also complete the day and have more intimate conversations. Ooh.
Is there any question? Anything you want to ask? Maybe one question if you want. Otherwise, the session we can also discuss maybe.
I mean, Michael, you taught a bit in it, right?
Yeah. It was, it changed my entire perspective on teaching. It's a wonderful, I have some questions for you actually, because I tried to take that out of the business school and into the data science or more technical program, and experienced a lot of challenges. The first being the time it takes to develop material and cases in advance.
Yes.
It's great that Darden gives some credit for that, but how would you recommend getting started if you're interested in kind of going to this case method? Do it for a course, do it for one example? Yeah,
it's a great question, and I'll try to be brief because I know that people have an agenda. So it is, it definitely benefits from an infrastructure. Okay, so if you try to do this on your own, it's not always easy. If you're doing like the workshops, for instance, or some effort like that, you could do it more systematically. But the things to think about are, I think you need at least a course, okay? Ideally, it's more than one course doing it in unison, but it's not gonna always happen. You could invite other professors that have a slightly different expertise, and then you will see the magic of bringing in multiple kind of domain expertise to the case discussion, which is also a very natural way to benefit from it. I would say I would start with the course. Cases, they do take a lot of effort up front to prepare the material, but it's like in a similar way to kind of a textbook. You prepare, you invest in that one, and then you can use it for years to come. So you invest in a few good cases, and it might take you time to write them and find them. But once you have them, you can kind of reuse them in many different ways, because a case and a data set you can use to teach a half a dozen techniques. Because genuinely, something that you can use for visualization. I know, that's it, we're done. Typically, a case and a good data set you can use for visualization, for hypothesis testing, for predictive modeling, and the like. So you can reuse it, okay? And then finally, what I'll say is the holy kind of trinity would be find your research projects, which I know that you're engaged in. Typically, actually, there's a case line in there, okay? Especially if your research has some practical relevance, which a lot of people in the forecasting domain have. For me, every case is like, I can write an academic paper, I can write a practitioner-oriented paper, and I can write a case. And it's just about thinking about writing a case and turning it around to find the company that's using your technique or your setup. And that could be in various domains. That would give you the most synergies with the rest of your work. And when you teach it, when you write the case and you teach it, you learn more about your research problem than you ever knew before. Right. We're getting disturbed. We're done. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody online.
here today and for joining us for the workshop. Just, I don't know if I remember maybe one thing. So for the democratizing forecasting initiative that we do in forecasting social good, actually we are looking for people to teach forecasting in some countries. In particular, we're looking for people who can teach in South America, like India, South Asia, and Africa. So if you have contacts there, you're close to those areas, and you want to teach forecasting, we are sponsoring, your travels to go to those places and teach forecasting. So if you are interested, please get in touch. Another thing is we have around 24 more sessions from tomorrow to Wednesday. So all forecasting for social good sessions are labeled as F4SG in the app. I think that's it for me. Might be
No, I think that's it.